right, guys, so our focus this week is top control. We're focusing primarily on the mount. Our main concept for controlling top positions is to utilize movement in order to stay one step ahead of our opponent's defenses and advance positionally or start to set up our attacks. If you weren't with us on Tuesday, we were talking a lot about how as jiu-jitsu fighters, we don't necessarily want to stop our opponent from moving 100% of the time. Pressure has its place, but if pressure is the only thing that you're able to do, then you're not going to open up opportunities for advancing positions necessarily or attacking. And what we want to understand is that we're going to run into an opponent who is going to be able to move us, regardless of if we have a size advantage or not. If size is the only reason that you are able to control someone, then we need to adjust some of our techniques, right? We need to have more options available. It's like guard retention. Just because you never play guard doesn't mean that you shouldn't have good guard retention, right? When you become a purple belt, if you never trained guard retention, now all of a sudden white belts are going to be passing your guard and you have to relearn all of that. So I'd rather us learn how to move on top of people as opposed to just sit on top of people and not allow anything to happen. That's kind of anti-jiu-jitsu. So what we looked at on Tuesday was first understanding how to get to the mount. Once we're there, we were talking about maintaining the control on our opponent's hips with a variety of different means, breaking posture, using our feet to control their hips. And then we finally talked about how we can move ourselves into the knee on belly when our hips are starting to disconnect from our opponent. So tonight, we're going to look at a different position that we can utilize called the technical mount. And then we're also going to go over one more style of movement similar to that windshield wiper motion. So the first thing that I want to go over, guys, is going to be the technical mount or the modified mount, as it's sometimes called. And we're going to look at this against an opponent who is doing a good technical hip escape, okay? So I'll explain what I mean. Again, it may seem like a silly point, but it really does add up when you're training a position to get into that position efficiently, okay? If I train the mount and I'm just wildly swinging my legs over, of course, your partner's not going to stop you because you're just drilling. But when you actually go to roll, that's going to be your habit of whenever I go to the mount, I do that by swinging my leg over, and that simply can't be the case, right? Whenever I'm going to mount, I always start off understanding how to get good position, turning my hips through, and then getting into a good mount. It doesn't have to be completely strict like this, but still try to make it as technical as possible. So what we're going to look at today is going to be the technical mount or the modified mount. This is going to be in reaction to our opponent turning onto their side and creating a frame on our hip to begin hip escaping. So if our opponent is trying to escape from the mount, there's two main ways to do that. They'll either do that via a bridge, where they lift their hips off the floor, adjusting my center of gravity and turning me over, or they're going to do that with a hip escape. Now, when Coach Seth creates this frame on my hip here and he starts to get up onto his side, his escape is fairly imminent, okay? Because what he's trying to do is he's trying to get my back knee off the floor, creating a lever for his hips to escape out of. So if I just kind of sit here and push myself back down into him, that's really not going to do much good. So this is the trigger that we're looking at this evening. Our opponent turns onto their side, and they're creating a frame on our hip. As soon as they do that, we're going to go to a technical or a modified mount, as it's sometimes called. So I'm going to demonstrate what that position looks like, and then we're going to talk about some of the nuances with it. So coach is going to turn, and now we are in the modified or the technical mount. All right, now I'm going to go over some of the differences between this and the chair sit position because they look somewhat similar, but there are a lot of important differences. So first things first. As with all of our top movements, I don't want to restrict my partner's movement. As he's turning, he's opening up an entryway to the back. So I'm always thinking positionally, how can I get to a better position? But sometimes he's just going to be stronger than I am. So as he's getting up onto his hip here, I'm going to be posting my hands out in front of me, and this is going to make my legs light. Because my legs are light, this allows me to bring my right foot up into his belly and my left knee clamped behind his belly in the same point, right? So I'm trying to touch my knee to my heel, but his body's in the way. Now, if you notice, my back toes are active, right? Because with active toes, I have the ability to generate but also receive force. And my front heel is tucked in along his stomach, and I'll show this from a couple different views. Now, I want to make sure that my chest stays low, and I'm actually driving my left hip in this case, my left hip, the one closest to his back, into my partner. My hands are still posted out in where they were in the beginning. Now, once I'm in this position, we're in the technical mount. If I want to put him back on his back, I'm simply going to gain lever control in the bottom arm, start lifting and pulling him back to his back. Okay, let's go ahead and rotate here a little bit. So most often when your opponent gets up onto their side, they're going to initiate it with a bridge. This is the danger, guys. The second my knee comes off the mat, I am turning a frame into a lever. So I need to recognize this. The second my knee is off the floor, I have to do something. We could do the windshield wiper like we looked at on Tuesday, but this is another good option to utilize. So again, what I'm going to do, this knee is going to go down to the mat, and I'm going to create a frame behind his hip as I bring my other foot onto the other side of his hip. I'm trying to box his hips in, okay? Most things in jiu-jitsu have to do with hips, as you'll come to find out, because that's the center of the mass. So I'm always going to be trying to find a way to create a box around my opponent's hips. Now, when I'm in this position, my hands are out in front of me. If I start to walk myself back, let's rotate here, coach. If I walk myself back too far, notice what happens to this knee. My knee starts to open up. Now, guess what? Everything's either a frame or a lever. If my knee is 90 degrees or greater, he's going to access this as a lever and start hip shoveling and putting me on my butt. So I want to keep my hands posted out in front of his head. I never want my head to go over, though, because now once my head is past his center line, then I'm off base. Okay, so I always want the alignment in my favor. I want to break down his base posture structure while maintaining my own. So once I'm in this position, my hip is sprawled into his back here, and my right knee is turned in just slightly. So now when he tries to push against this knee, it's very difficult, okay? Because physiologically my knee is turned in, it's going to be harder for him to push it back out the other way. So this is a movement that should be reactionary, number one, but it's a movement that we should be able to go to and back from relatively quickly, okay? Again, I'm in this position with dead toes, he bridges and turns to his side, and I immediately transition into the technical or modified mount. Either name works. Now, if my opponent's arm has slipped past my center line, now we can set up our chair sit, okay? We're not gonna look too much into this because we're focusing on the mount this week. So what I want you guys to do instead is once you're here, we're simply gonna be grabbing our opponent's bottom arm. We could go sleeve, we could go wrist. Ideally, we're gonna look for the elbow, and I'm gonna be pulling up on this lever, rotating his body, and bringing myself back to the mount. Okay, so we'll go through slow motion one more time. I'm gonna allow my partner to bridge and get up onto their side. I immediately modify my mount, active toes in the back, my right heel pulled into his belly button. My hands are posted out. Maintain a good base with the head. I don't wanna be leaning too far forward. Ride this position for a little bit and let your partner on the bottom just move around. Don't go crazy. Just move around a little bit. See if they feel locked in. Their hips should be pretty stuck. And then when you're ready, grab the bottom arm, start pulling, and put them back down flat. Let's rotate here, coach. I'll show it again without talking. Okay, guys, I want to point out one more thing. As Coach Seth comes up onto his side, my hips need to go up with him. Okay, again, I'm trying to ride the wave. I'm riding his movement. If I just commit my hips super heavy to his, like we were talking about on Tuesday, as he moves, I have the tendency to fall over because my weight is completely committed to these hips. So as he moves, I move. And again, I'm trying to create a box around his hips. Okay, now again, we're gonna talk about the difference between this position and the chair sit position, because these are different things. Right now, our opponent has this frame, okay? So I don't want us moving our leg up to their head because we're simply not able to do that if our opponent has a good strategic frame here. All right, guys, I'll demonstrate once more from head on, nice and slow. Have your partner move around a little bit. Once you're ready, come back to mount. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, so go slow. Try both sides, but as always, work one side until you feel pretty proficient at it.
Really quick, for the bottom person, the movement is this: frame across their belly, reinforce that hand, bridge up, and then you're gonna go towards where your hands are joined. I'm gonna bridge, and I'm gonna go over that shoulder, and then I'm gonna come down onto my shoulder here. That's how you're gonna set this up. Otherwise, you're gonna mess up the whole thing.
And don't worry, we're going to do hip escapes and escapes in general next week, so this is going to be a good entry to that. All righty, guys. If there's no question, go ahead and drill this with our partner. On to 1, 2. All right, guys, so I want to add in a couple extra details here and hopefully clarify some things. So first, I'm going to pantomime this. I'm in the mount. I'm going to do it sideways. I'm in the mount, okay? You know, my hips are floating. I never want to be sitting directly on their hips because that's going to create more movement as they bridge, so my hips are floating just slightly. As they go to bridge, guys, my hands need to post forward. This makes our legs light, okay? If I'm sitting back really heavy like this, I'm not going to be able to move my legs. So I post forward. And now, as I do my hip adjustment, I'm rotating my left leg out as my right leg comes in. And my body, in case you can't tell, is slightly angled towards their head, okay? Just like this. Remember, there's a frame across my hips. I can't necessarily move any more forward, but my hip is still driving heavy, my back toes are driving forward, and my goal is to try to touch my heel to my knee. Of course, their body is right here. I'm not going to be able to do that. If my hips are back, notice how my knee angle shifts. They're then going to start accessing that knee lever and putting me on my butt. So I want to make sure I'm always coming to active toes. Now, I want to go over a couple of important differences here. So some of us are thinking that this is similar to their chair sit position. It is completely okay for my hips to come up past his shoulder, provided that he doesn't have a frame in front of me, okay? If he is doing a good hip escape, he should be framing on my hip, okay? And we're not preparing ourselves for someone who doesn't know what they're doing. We're preparing ourselves for someone who understands how to create a good solid frame here to facilitate their hip escape. So if this arm is just not there, or he's overextended or overrolled himself, for sure, we're just gonna move up and get to chair sit, okay? But if he has this frame here, guys, I can't. Look, I can't move towards him. Of course, I can start dragging, but this is different. We're not necessarily trying to move ourselves up in advanced positions yet. We're focusing on trying to box his hips in to stop the hip escape. That is our focus. We are reacting to movements by moving our body. I notice he's going for a hip escape, and so I adjust to box his hips in to stop him from hip escaping. So that's why our whole focus is on boxing these hips in, right? That's why I'm bringing this knee behind this side, this heel behind the other side, and I'm driving my hips down low, okay? If I start coming up too high here, not only will he be able to push me over, but I'm not controlling his hips. So even if I get high up here with this knee, maybe he can't access this, but he can still start hip escaping into me here and putting me down. Okay, and the whole reason was because he had a frame, okay? Yeah, maybe I can start like attacking arm bars or triangles here, but again, he has good structure, okay? When my opponent has good structure, meaning efficient positioning of his limbs, I can't be as effective as possible. Remember, if he has good structure, I need to move myself around that. So, we'll turn sideways here. As he turns and gets to his side, I'm modifying my mount to get to a hip control position. Notice how my hip is driving into his. My hands are posted out nice and wide. Some of us are trying to do this without hands. The reason that you're doing that is because you want to focus more so on the legs. But this is a full body position. If I take my hands off the mat, I need to compensate by moving my hips off of him. Now look at the space between the two of us. There's this giant gap that's existed here. As he starts to hip escape, I need to play catch up and try to go get him now, okay? So if I was more preventative and kept that space closed with my hip, now his hips aren't gonna be able to move, okay? I can let him burn himself out, and eventually, again, I come for the elbow grip. This is gonna be one of the easier grips to get, right? If I try to reach back and fumble with the wrist, that's fine, but I'm not trying to pull his forearm, I'm trying to rotate his shoulder. So by grabbing at the elbow, this is going to affect the lever to the shoulder. And again, as I pull this up, I'm rotating my knees back down and putting him back where I want him, okay? So now, I want you guys to try one more round. If you didn't try the other side, feel free to give it a go. But focus on getting to a good position where you are trapping their hips in, okay? So as he bridges, I post to make my hips light. I adjust. Notice how my chest doesn't really move too much. And again, I'm driving off of these toes. If these toes are dead, I can't receive or provide any force. So I need to have good base in the back, driving, pinching, and I'm riding this position, okay? When I'm ready, grab and move myself back down. I'll say one more time. It is not wrong for me to move myself up here to a chair sit position, provided that there is no longer a frame in between the two of us. Because what I don't want you guys to start doing is thinking just chair sit, but you forget that there's a frame here, and as you're sliding your knee up high, guess what? They're escaping. And you've ruined your opportunities of maintaining the mount because you wanted to move up too high too early, okay? So if that frame isn't there, we're just gonna go chair sit, okay? But we're assuming that our opponent's gonna be creating good defenses, they have good frames, and we're not just gonna be able to slide up. All right, guys? A little bit more conceptual, but does this make sense to you guys? Okay, any questions? Remember, it's all frames and levers. I'm trying to manipulate theirs while maintaining mine, and then we can accomplish our task, okay? Let's get one more round. Ready, 1, 2, let's go. Okay, everybody, does anyone have any questions on that technical mount? I hope I was able to clarify some of the differences between this and the chair sit position. The chair sit position is for taking backs. The technical mount is for controlling hips, okay? From the technical mount, you have a lot of options. You can attack the arms, you know, kimuras, chokes, things like this, but it all starts from controlling the hips. When our opponent's frame moves off of our hips, oh man, we can start moving up their body, absolutely. But we have to prepare ourselves for an opponent who has a strong frame, and we can't just move our hips up. So our focus is going to be not letting them hip escape. Now, I want to go over one more movement similar to what we did last class with the windshield wiper. And in case you weren't with us, the windshield wiper was where, if we were in the mount, as my opponent starts to bridge, and I notice that our hips are disconnecting, I bring my foot over, and I get into our knee on belly, and then subsequently our knee ride position before I can then return to the mount. And the reason that we would do this is because we have to understand when to fold them. I am going to lose the mount, and I would rather get to knee on belly than have to start passing the guard again. So, and this is particularly important if I'm going against somebody much bigger who has just an easy time bench pressing me off of them. When they go to just bench press me off, I bring this foot over, preventing him from bringing his knees back in. Okay, that's the point of bringing this knee in between the two of us, and then I can start rotating their hips away from me with the knee ride, which could even set up back attacks and things like this. But again, we're understanding how to move in reaction to our opponent's movements. We're gonna do one more similar movement. It's called a top spin. This is one that can be done from a lot of different positions, but since we were looking at that knee on belly on Tuesday, let's go ahead and do it from there. So, we're gonna start in the knee on belly. Of course, you could go from the mount and then they go and bridge you off and you would windshield wiper. But regardless, we're gonna start here in the knee on belly. Our opponent is gonna be trying to turn into us to get to their side, and they're gonna be looking to get an underhook on our body. So if I'm here, he's turning in and he's trying to get his arm underneath mine, okay? His objective is to try to build up and start attacking with the leg and coming up on a takedown, or to shift my center of gravity and take me down and escape from the position. So what we're gonna do is a top spin. Essentially, I'm gonna change my body from this side of his body to that side of his body. The windshield wiper may not be as good of an option in this situation, and the reason for that is because if he already has this underhook here, as I start to windshield wiper, he can use that underhook to start shifting my body away. So once we're in this position, my partner gets an arm underneath mine. This is called an underhook. We're gonna start off, as always, with some type of posture break, okay? So I'm gonna be as nice as possible about this, but in reality, I would be pushing their head down pretty hard, okay? This is creating a bend in their spine, breaking their posture. Number one, preventing them from coming up as quickly, but number two, allowing me to step over this head easier. I'm gonna show the entire top spin in slow motion. And now I'm in the knee on belly, but on the other side, okay? So if we do it again, my opponent turns into me. I'm gonna keep one hand holding their hip. My other hand is gonna go for their head. Be as gentle as you'd like. I'm gonna be pushing his head down. I'm not trying to do like a push-up position here like this. I'm simply trying to hold his head away from me. Now, I wanna disconnect our body, okay? What I mean is I wanna move myself away from him a little bit. And the reason for that is because if I try stepping over his head right now, I'm probably gonna lose my balance and allow him to come up on top. So his objective is to try to come in towards me. If I can start to change that angle and move myself away from him a little bit, it's gonna be harder for him to come up. So again, I'm posting, I move myself away, and now I'm just gonna step one foot over his head And I'm gonna take my other leg and start spinning it behind me until I can get my knee on the other side. Some of you may be familiar with our top spin drill from side mount, where he comes in with the underhook, and it's the same sort of thing, but we finish in the side mount on the other side. That's great, but I wanna focus on the knee on belly today because that's what we were working on Tuesday. We can save the side mount variation for another day. All right, coach, so we're here. I'm in the knee on belly. He gets his underhook. So I create my frames. I disengage and move myself away from him. Remember, I can't just sit here because he's gonna start getting up. So I gotta move. I step over his head, 1. I don't wanna come down right now, okay? We can, of course, to start attacking, but if our objective is to just stay in the top position, let's keep moving. I step, and now I'm gonna take my other leg, and I'm gonna basically do like a spin kick. As I rotate my body to the other side, knee on the belly. If I still have back exposure here, of course we can fit in for the chair sit. I hope you guys are starting to see how prolific the chair sit is, right? You're always looking for that chair sit. Okay, guys, so again, hands in the position, posting, disengage your bodies, step, step, and get to the other side. They can then again throw the underhook back in, disengage, and go to the other side. And it could just be a flow drill, meaning there's no stopping, okay? It's just gonna continue, continue, continue. All right, I'll show it again from the rear without talking. Alrighty, guys. I know this isn't necessarily the mount, but when it comes to the mount, the knee on belly and the mount, they're pretty close, right? Because we can utilize that windshield wiper to dismount to knee on belly. And then from that position, depending on how our opponent reacts, we can then do this top spin to get around behind them. Does anybody need to see it again?
No, sir.
All right, guys, on to 1, 2. Here we go.